As the Albanese government tightens gambling ad regulations, brand marketers see a golden opportunity to dominate the sporting arena and embrace the rise of female sports, reshaping audience engagement beyond traditional stereotypes. For more, we're joined by Darren Woolley from Trinity P3. Good to see you. Obviously so much going on in the world, but gambling advertising has meant a lot to sports codes and to TV networks. What do you think will happen from here?
Well, look, I think the first thing, Ahron, is that it's meant a lot to the community. You know, there was a finding and recommendations passed down almost 2 years ago about what needed to be done with gambling advertising. And the government has embraced many of the recommendations, but not all of them. A lot of people, particularly in marketing and advertising, are not particularly happy about any sort of regulation. But I think in this case, the government is actually creating opportunity because the sports gambling companies had very deep pockets and were able to largely buy up a lot of that inventory. I don't know about you, but every time you watch live sport, it seemed every break would have some sort of gambling ad into it. And now that's being stopped. So I think what that will do is open up that space for other brand marketers to actually come into sport. Because as you said, the thing that's happened with sport is that it's not just a male domain anymore. We've seen the rise of participation and watching women's sport. And so that's very much broadened the audience that marketers can reach beyond what was stereotypically considered a male-dominated advertising opportunity.
How reliant, though, are sporting codes when it comes to big television dollars on those sporting ads, because the betting ads, because that's what the warnings have been from the TV industry and also the sporting codes to say, well, they're the ones with the advertising money. You mentioned that there's an opportunity for, I guess, others to come into the space. Do they exist? Are they still interested in being involved? And if not now, why not?
Well, look, I think anyone old enough would remember when tobacco advertising used to be big sponsors of sporting events. I know that's quite a long time ago, and everyone was doom and gloom about that, but that's changed. You know, there was a replacement. Then it was alcohol advertising, and now it's gambling. I think when we've got social issues such as the problem with gambling and gambling impacts, that the government needs to make some sort of regulation. This is why I think the change in sport, you know, you think 10 years ago, women's sport got very little coverage on television. Now we've got women's teams getting, you know, audience reaches that are equivalent of men and sometimes higher. We've got a whole new audience out there of women watching and participating in these sports. And I think that's really where it's going to appeal to brands that wouldn't traditionally look at sport.
Interestingly, though, I take what you say there, but in terms of the money which is coming in, do you think that the money will be able to be replaced? And the other side as well is, compared to those days where tobacco was advertising, the cost of sports rights has skyrocketed. I mean, to the point that the cost of putting the AFL on television is higher than the market cap of the television network broadcasting it. Has it just gotten so out of control that has led to a reliance on things like sports betting?
Look, and I will admit that in the short term, there'll probably be a dip until those advertisers see the opportunity and start investing. The other thing is it time for a realignment anyway? I mean, in almost every aspect of the economy, we have corrections. Is this time for a correction in sports rights? Have the sporting codes become overly greedy, and have the networks or the media companies also become in a race to see who can bid the most? I think, you know, this is not going to be the end of televised sport. It's not going to be the end of broadcast sport. I think what it will do is probably make people rethink the value of it. But again, they need to be out there talking to advertisers. Look at the advertisers that jump on board with the Olympics every 4 years, or the Paralympics, or jump on board with the World Cup soccer. You know, these are not just core male brands. They have a very broad audience, and I think this is what the media owners that are buying these sporting rights and the sports owners themselves need to start looking at how do they make themselves more appealing to a broader audience of advertisers rather than relying on gambling and alcohol and all of these other categories that socially bring about real issues for government to address.
I interviewed the legendary Harold Mitchell, must have been 10 years ago now, at his offices in South Melbourne, the Emerald Building. And I asked him about the Channel 7 sports rights at the time, which I think were about $1 billion. And he said back then, this is the last $1 billion deal we'll see. He got a lot right, not that. He then went on to become the chair, I think, of Free TV, which obviously probably went against what he said there. But the point is for such a long time, there's been so much money being spent on these TV rights for sport at the expense of drama. At the expense of so many other things. We're seeing the TV networks really having to cut costs. I mean, every time you check, there's more job cuts right across the board, particularly in news and current affairs. And do you think, though, that seeing something like this, you mentioned that there will be a tightening. Do you think the sports clubs need to stop being so reliant on television dollars?
Well, look, I think it's become very easy for them to look to television rights as a major funding. This will cause a correction. But they'll also need to rethink, for those that are not getting the sort of money that they think that they should get, how can they change either the way they present their sport or the way they manage it so that it appeals to a wider and a wider audience? Because ultimately that will be the equation that advertisers and their agencies will be looking at, is audience delivery, audience type, but also the environment that surrounds it to make sure that this is where they want to be seen to be investing their money.
All right, now the Australian government has partnered with global AI leader Anthropic to enhance the nation's AI capabilities under its national AI plan, aiming for responsible innovation and investment in the sector. Darren, talk to us about this, because as we know, there's been a pretty tough relationship between the Trump administration and Anthropic after they said no to the Pentagon's request to use it. Talk to us about this national AI plan and what the main goals are in Australia.
Well, look, the first thing, yes, you're right. Anthropic are currently in a legal dispute with the US government over this. So, it's interesting that the Australian government is greeting them supposedly with open arms. I thought it was interesting that this announcement was made by both the government and Anthropic on the 1st of April. So you could be confused and think that it's an April Fool's Day stunt, but it's not. The government has got a very clear agenda to embrace AI because it is so good for the economy. Everything from the massive servers that will be required for it to the jobs that it will bring and the possible export dollars for development is unbelievable. This will be the 4th country that Anthropic have invested in or set up in Asia Pacific. And I think that shows a really good sign that the Australian government is on the front foot here with embracing technology. There's one small sticking point which will be interesting to see, because traditionally the Australian government has taken a very strong line about copyright and intellectual property ownership. It was an issue raised a week or so ago, but it was interesting that the Attorney General, Michelle Rowland, made statements that didn't say the government was willing to back down, but they were open to re-looking at how copyright protection would be interpreted when it comes to AI. So it'll be interesting to see what that actually means, because up till now, they've been very hard line on protecting copyright owners' rights under an AI investment.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch, because obviously there's a lot of concerns about how many staff the Australian government employs, concerns about efficiency, whether they'll be able to use AI for that. And then there have been some wondering whether the Australian government will actually try and clamp down on the widespread use of AI as well, with all of the doom and gloom stories about 20% unemployment, etc. there too. Interesting to see that they're partnering with Anthropic, at least with this MOU. We've got to leave it there. Always appreciate your insights. Thanks so much, Darren Woolley, Trinity P3.
Thank you.